Welcome back to Let's Make a Game, the channel where we are making a computer role-playing game using the free program Twine and the Sugarcube format for Twine. In this video, I want to talk about a feature of Twine that I haven't discussed before, and in fact I don't think I've even mentioned it before, and that is the find and replace functionality. And first of all, how do you get to it? Well, if you're in the passage menu, you have to get out of that into the story menu, or if you're in either of those other two, of course, you have to get into the story menu, and then it's the first one on the left. Now, if you've used a word processing program such as Microsoft Office or OpenOffice, you would probably have used find and replace at times. What it does is it allows you to find any instance of whatever string of text you specify. And if you want, you can also say every instance of a particular type of text, replace it with something else. So for example, let's say I have been writing a game where I've been describing a particular class of characters as warriors, and now I want to call them swordsmen instead. I could, if there were any instances of that text, it would tell me how many there were down here in the bottom right-hand corner. It's currently telling me there are none, of course, and this would be highlighted, and I could replace every instance of warrior with swordsman if that was something I wanted to do. So, for example, if I decide that the variable R, I don't want to call it R anymore, I want to call it R3. So that'll highlight every instance of R. Now it's telling me there's 18 which have that, and it's highlighting the ones that have that in yellow. I can also minimize this if I want to get a bit more view on the screen. Now if I count that, I can see that there's fewer than 18 there, so there must be others somewhere else. So if your program is big and you need to find every instance of where something is, you might want to use the zoom function up here. But I'll just delete that. But you don't necessarily need to replace anything. You can just use it to find, if, for example, you know that there was a passage where the phrase "back the way you came," and I can't remember where it was. Well, now it's highlighting these four, and if I was to zoom in, I could just click on that and see if it, is that the one? Well, no, that's not the one, and so on. I could keep going. Eventually, track down the one I was looking for. The options are pretty straightforward. Include passage names means what it says. It'll include these. Every page in Twine has a name, and it'll include that in the search if this is included. Match case is to do with uppercase and lowercase. So, for example, is this the same as that? If I search for that, do I want to find any instance of the one of this one as well? Well, if I click match case, then yes, I do, and if I have that unticked, then no, I don't. I'm treating them as two separate things. Use regular expressions is probably the only one that will be a little bit unfamiliar. If you've used Microsoft Office, you might know about wildcards, where you can use particular characters and they mean any character. For example, if I put something like that, in particular versions of Microsoft Office, asterisk was a wildcard, and it meant that would find every word or every instance of text where there was S, any three characters, and then a Y, or rather, because I haven't got match case ticked, a lowercase s in particular, any other three characters, and then a lowercase y. And regular expressions are similar to that, but there's a lot more of them, and you can get a lot more specific. And going through them in detail is probably too much information for how most people are going to use this function. So I won't do that in this video, but instead I will link to a page that has all of the different expressions you can use. It's the reason there's so much detail in that is that it's a thing from JavaScript, which Twine has just taken on as it uses JavaScript. It's sort of built on top of JavaScript. So that, that's what that is. But it's probably going to be more in depth than what most people will want. You'll probably use it just for changing the names of things or finding a thing that you've sort of forgotten quite where it is or something like that. The only other thing I want to say is I sort of want to sound a note of caution with using the replace function. You can just use this to find stuff, or you can say, no, I don't want to use RR anymore. I want to call that R3 or R2 or whatever, and it's telling me there's 9 examples of this. So it's these ones and 2 others. If I wanted to, I could replace it like that. I would be very wary of doing that without, like, I'd sort of recommend instead looking, finding it and then clicking into the particular pages and then searching through it and making sure that you want to make the change, even though that's going to sort of take a long time. And I'll give you an example, and this is a real thing that happened. This was in not in a computer game, but it was in a printed Dungeons and Dragons product. They had throughout the book references to mages, meaning wizards, and the management said, look, we don't want you to call them mages anymore. We want you to call them wizards. So they did a search and replace. In this case, this was in a word processing document. Obviously, it wasn't in anything like Twine, but it does illustrate a possible problem. So they did something like, okay, find mage, replace with wizard, replace all, go. And there was a big problem, which was there was, throughout the book, there was this word, damage, and that includes the text M-A-G-E. So what you ended up with was da wizard all throughout the book. Every time there was any reference to damage, and of course that's a really common word in tabletop role-playing, it said something like take 1d6 da wizard, and that of course didn't mean anything. And I believe the book actually went out like that. And so they suffered quite a reputational loss. Well, you probably won't suffer a reputational loss just because you're probably not sending things out to an audience of thousands. But what you probably will find is that you might make a mistake like that. But you can particularly do that with variable names. If you say, well, I want to change every instance of R to R2. What happens if there's a variable that you've forgotten about, like R3? That'll now become R23. And you might go, well, I know how to get out of that. I'll search for space R, or I'll search for $R space and replace it with $R2 space. Okay, that will solve the problem, but now you've got a new problem, which is if it's $R bracket, that won't change anything. So you go, all right, well, I'll search for $R bracket and change it to $R2 square bracket. Okay, and then I'll look for $R this bracket, and I'll change it for $R2 this bracket. But once you sort of mention, all right, I'll look for $R dot length and search for $R2 dot length, and sort of once you come up with all the possible combinations that you're searching for and replacing, it might just be easier to go through by hand anyway. Like you might not be saving anything. Once you're sort of cautious enough to look, to not trick yourself into changing something you don't want to change, that might end up being so slow that you're better off just going, all right, you know what, I'm just going to search for R, and then everything that it highlights, I'll go through and look by hand and make sure that it is something that I want to change. So that is a note of caution. Okay, that was a bit long-winded, but what I'm saying is be very careful with the find and replace element of it. The finding is fine, of course. It just highlights a page, and that won't make any changes to it. But be very careful with the find and replace. But it can be quite useful if you have a change in, say, the structure of your files, and you say, all right, I'm not going to have. I used to have pics/monsters used to be one of the files that I was keeping pictures in, but I don't want to have that as a separate file anymore. I'm just going to go /pics. So I've moved everything up a level, and I just want to change the program to reflect that. Click, okay. That something like that's probably going to be okay. But if it's something that could possibly trip you up, like the names of variables or changing text, be a bit more careful with it. But anyway, I hope that is useful or interesting to at least some of you, and I hope that you will tune in next time.